The cold wind bit at Owen Nash's face as he guided his horse through the narrow canyon pass, cursing himself for taking the shortcut through the Dakota Territory Badlands in late February of 1876, when a woman's scream pierced through the howling wind and stopped him dead in his tracks. He pulled his mare to a halt, listening intently over the whistling gale. There it was again, weaker this time, barely audible but unmistakably human. Owen dismounted quickly, his boots crunching through the icy crust of snow as he followed the sound around a cluster of frost-covered rocks. What he found made his blood run cold despite the years of hardship he had witnessed on the frontier. A woman lay huddled against the sheltered side of a boulder, her dress torn and filthy, her lips blue with cold. But that was not what made Owen's heart clench. Clutched against her chest, wrapped in what appeared to be pieces of her own petticoat, were two tiny babies, their weak cries barely louder than mewing kittens. "Madam," Owen said, kneeling beside her quickly. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, gray as storm clouds and filled with desperate fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please save my babies. Let me die, but please save them." "Nobody's dying today if I have anything to say about it," Owen said firmly, already shrugging off his heavy coat to wrap around her and the infants. He could feel how thin she was, nothing but bones and will. "Can you stand?" "I do not know," she admitted, tears freezing on her pale cheeks. "I have not eaten in 3 days, maybe 4. I lost count." Owen did not waste time with more questions. He lifted her as gently as he could, babies and all, shocked at how little she weighed. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with tangled brown hair that might have been beautiful if it was not matted with dirt and ice. He carried her to his horse, which nickered nervously at the extra burden. "Easy, Sadie," he murmured to the mare. "We're all going to have to work together here." Getting the woman into the saddle while she held the babies was a challenge, but Owen managed it, then swung up behind her to keep her steady. "There's a cave about 2 miles south," he said. "Used it last spring during a storm." "Can you hold on that long?" "I will try," she breathed. "What's your name?" Owen asked as he urged Sadie forward, both to keep her talking and because he needed to know. "Hannah," she said softly. "Hannah Redding, and these are my sons Samuel and Simon." "Owen Nash," he replied. "And you are going to be just fine, Hannah Redding, all 3 of you." He felt her sag against him, unconscious, and his arms tightened around her reflexively. The babies whimpered, and Owen found himself speaking nonsense words of comfort to them as he guided his horse through the treacherous snow, praying they would reach shelter before the full force of the storm hit. The cave was exactly where he remembered it, a deep cleft in the rock face that provided protection from the wind. Owen dismounted and carefully lifted Hannah and the twins down, carrying them inside before returning for his saddlebags and the supplies he always kept on hand. Years of wandering the frontier had taught him to be prepared. He built a fire quickly, his hands working from long practice even as his mind raced. Once flames were crackling and spreading warmth through the cave, he turned his attention to his unexpected charges. The babies needed food, and so did their mother, desperately. Owen had dried beef, hardtack, and a small amount of coffee in his supplies, nothing suitable for infants. He knelt beside Hannah, gently shaking her shoulder. "Hannah, wake up. I need to know what the babies can eat." Her eyes opened slowly, confused and unfocused. "They need milk," she whispered, "but I have none. I am too weak, too starved. They have been crying for 2 days." Owen thought quickly. "I have a canteen of water. We can try giving them tiny amounts. It is not much, but it is something." "They will die," Hannah said, her voice hollow with grief. "I have failed them." "No," Owen said firmly. "You kept them alive this long. That took strength most people do not have. Now you let me help, you understand." He dampened a piece of cloth with water and let the baby suck on it. They latched on desperately, their small faces scrunched with effort. It was not enough, he knew, but it would keep them going for now. "You need to eat too," he told Hannah, breaking off a piece of hardtack and dipping it in water to soften it. "I know it is not much, but you have to get your strength back." She ate slowly, mechanically, and he could see her struggling to keep the food down. "Where did you come from?" he asked gently. "How did you end up out here?" Hannah was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. "My husband Thomas, we were heading west to join his brother in the Montana Territory. We had a wagon, supplies, everything we needed. But Thomas caught fever 2 weeks ago. He died 4 days later." "I am sorry," Owen said quietly. "The wagon train left us behind when he got sick," Hannah continued, her words coming faster now as if a dam had broken. "They said they could not risk the illness spreading. I buried Thomas myself, and I tried to follow the trail on foot with the babies, but I got lost in a snowstorm. I have been walking for days, maybe a week. Everything is a blur." Owen felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of a wagon train abandoning a young mother with infant twins, but he pushed it down. Anger would not help them now. "You are safe now," he said instead. "I promise you that." "Why should I believe the promises of a stranger?" Hannah asked, but there was no heat in her words, only exhaustion. "Because I am all you have got right now," Owen replied honestly. "And because I am not the kind of man who leaves women and babies to freeze to death in the wilderness." She studied his face in the firelight, and he let her look. Owen knew what she would see. A man of 26 with sun-weathered skin, brown hair that needed cutting, and honest blue eyes. He was not much to look at, scarred from hard living and rough work, but he had always prided himself on being decent. "Thank you," Hannah finally said, "for not leaving us." "Get some rest," Owen told her. "The storm should pass by morning, and then we will figure out what comes next." But the storm did not pass by morning. It raged for 3 days, trapping them in the cave while the wind howled like a living thing outside. Owen rationed his supplies carefully, giving most of the food to Hannah and keeping the fire going constantly. The babies cried often, their small bodies racked with hunger that water alone could not satisfy. On the 2nd day, Hannah's fever came. Owen sat beside her through the night, placing cool compresses on her forehead and forcing water between her cracked lips. The babies lay on either side of her, and Owen found himself caring for all 3, changing the makeshift cloths the twins were wrapped in, keeping them warm, trying desperately to keep them alive. "They are going to die because of me," Hannah mumbled in her delirium. "Just like Thomas died." "Thomas died of fever, not because of you," Owen said firmly. "And these boys are not going to die, neither are you. I will not allow it." "You cannot stop death," she whispered. "Watch me," he replied. The 3rd morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Hannah's fever had broken during the night, and though she was weak, her eyes were clear when she opened them. "You are still here," she said, sounding surprised. "Where else would I be?" Owen asked, adding wood to the fire. "I thought perhaps I dreamed you," Hannah admitted. "A guardian angel sent to ease our passing." "I am no angel," Owen said with a slight smile, "just a cowboy with a stubborn streak." The babies were sleeping, their breathing steady despite their hunger. Owen knew they could not wait much longer. "We need to get you all to a town," he said. "Somewhere with supplies, with a doctor." "Where are we?" Hannah asked. "Dakota Territory, about 40 miles northeast of Deadwood," Owen replied. "It is rough country, but Deadwood has what we need." "Is it safe?" Hannah asked. "I have heard stories." "Nowhere is truly safe," Owen said honestly. "But I know people there. We can get the babies milk, get you proper food and rest. After that, well, we will figure it out." Hannah looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could have left us and no one would have known. Why burden yourself with a stranger and her children?" Owen was quiet, pouring coffee from his tin pot. "My sister died when I was 16, he said finally. "She was trying to have a baby and something went wrong. Both she and the child died and I was too far away to help. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to save a mother and her babies, I would not fail." "I am sorry," Hannah said softly. "It was 10 years ago," Owen replied, "but some things stay with you." They set out that afternoon, moving slowly through the snow. Owen walked beside Sadie, leading the horse while Hannah rode with the babies. Every few hours they stopped to rest, and Owen would give Hannah whatever food he could spare, watching her eat with the same intensity she had when he first found her. "You should eat too," Hannah said on the second day of travel. "I am fine," Owen lied. Truth was, he had given her most of his supplies and his own stomach was growling constantly. But she needed the strength more than he did. "You are a terrible liar," Hannah said, and there was almost a smile in her voice. "Here we share." She broke the hardtack in half and handed him a piece. Their fingers touched briefly, and Owen felt something unexpected spark in his chest. He pushed it away quickly. This woman had just lost her husband. She needed help, not some cowboy developing feelings. They reached Deadwood 4 days after leaving the cave. The town was as rough and wild as Owen remembered, filled with miners, gamblers, and opportunists, all seeking their fortunes in the Black Hills. But it also had what they needed: a general store, a doctor of sorts, and a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. "Lord have mercy," Mrs. Patterson said when she saw Hannah and the babies. She was a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. "Get them inside immediately. You there, Cowboy, help me get her upstairs." Between Owen and Mrs. Patterson, they got Hannah into a clean bed in a small room. The babies were crying lustily now, their hunger impossible to ignore any longer. "I will get milk," Mrs. Patterson said briskly. "There is a woman 2 streets over with a milk cow. You stay with her." Owen sat in the chair beside the bed, feeling awkward and out of place in the feminine room. Hannah's eyes were closed, her face pale against the white pillows. "Thank you," she said without opening her eyes. "For everything." "You already thanked me," Owen replied. "It bears repeating." Mrs. Patterson returned with milk and clean cloths, and together she and Hannah fed the babies. Owen watched Samuel and Simon drink greedily, their small hands waving in contentment, and felt relief wash through him. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. "Now then," Mrs. Patterson said once the babies were settled and sleeping. "What is the story here?" Hannah told her tale again, and Owen watched the older woman's face darken with anger at the mention of the abandoned wagon train. "Cowards, Mrs. Patterson spat. "Leaving a young mother alone like that, it is disgraceful." "It is done now," Hannah said quietly. "I cannot change it." "No, but you can move forward," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You will stay here as long as you need. The room is yours." "I have no money," Hannah said, shame coloring her voice. "Did I ask for money?" Mrs. Patterson replied. "You have 2 babies to care for. That is work enough. We will figure out the rest later." Owen stood. "I should go. You all need rest." "Wait," Hannah said, struggling to sit up. "Where will you stay? You spent all your supplies on us." "I will find something," Owen said. "Do not worry about me." "Mr. Nash," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice taking on a tone that brooked no argument, "you will take the room at the end of the hall. No charge, since you brought these poor souls to safety. I insist." Owen wanted to argue, but the truth was he was bone-tired and had not slept properly in days. "Just for tonight," he said. "We shall see," Mrs. Patterson replied with a knowing look. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Owen found himself unable to sleep. His thoughts kept returning to Hannah, to the strength he had seen in her eyes despite everything she had endured. He barely knew her, but something about her had gotten under his skin. "Stop it," he told himself firmly. "She is a widow with 2 babies. She does not need your foolish feelings complicating things." But his heart, it seemed, was not interested in listening to reason. The next few days fell into a pattern. Owen found work at the livery stable, mucking out stalls and tending horses. It was not glamorous, but it paid enough for him to contribute to the boarding house and buy supplies. In the evenings, he found himself drawn to the small sitting room where Hannah would be with the twins. "You do not have to keep checking on us," Hannah said one evening, but her tone was gentle, not dismissive. "I know," Owen replied, settling into the chair across from her, "but I like to see how they are doing." It was true. Watching the babies grow stronger each day filled him with a satisfaction he had not expected. Samuel was the quieter of the two, content to watch the world with solemn eyes, while Simon was more vocal, announcing his displeasure at any slight discomfort. "They are already developing their own personalities," Hannah said, following his gaze. "Samuel is like his father, thoughtful and steady. Simon is more like me, I am afraid, impatient and loud." "You are not loud," Owen said. "You did not know me before," Hannah replied, and there was a hint of sadness in her voice. "Before Thomas died, before everything fell apart, I used to laugh all the time, I used to sing." "You can sing again," Owen said quietly. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday." Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, and Owen felt heat rise in his cheeks. "You are a kind man, Owen Nash," she said softly. "Kinder than I deserve." "That is nonsense," Owen replied. "You deserve every kindness the world has to offer." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things, until Simon let out a wail that shattered the silence. Hannah laughed, breaking the tension, and reached for her son. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. The snow began to melt, revealing muddy streets and the first hints of green on the hills surrounding Deadwood. Owen continued working at the livery, saving every penny he could. An idea had been forming in his mind, growing stronger each day, but he was not sure how to approach it. One evening in late March, Mrs. Patterson cornered him in the hallway. "You have feelings for her," she said bluntly. Owen started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point? "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone looking," Mrs. Patterson replied. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "She is in mourning," Owen said. "It would not be right." "She is also practical," Mrs. Patterson said. "That girl has 2 babies and no husband in a town full of rough men. She needs security, safety. And you, Mr. Nash, are a good man who clearly cares for her and those children." "I cannot just ask her to marry me," Owen protested. "We have known each other barely a month." "This is not Boston society," Mrs. Patterson said. "This is the frontier. People do what they must to survive." "But it has to be her choice. You understand that?" Owen nodded slowly. "I understand." 2 days later, he took Hannah for a walk. The babies were with Mrs. Patterson, who had shooed them out the door with instructions to get some fresh air. They walked to the edge of town where they could see the hills stretching endlessly into the distance. "It is beautiful here," Hannah said quietly. "Harsh, but beautiful." "Hannah," Owen said, his heart pounding, "I need to ask you something." She turned to face him, her gray eyes questioning. "I have been thinking," Owen continued, the words coming out in a rush. "About the future, about what comes next. I know you are still grieving Thomas, and I am not trying to replace him or dishonor his memory. But I care about you, and I care about Samuel and Simon. I want to take care of all 3 of you if you will let me." "Owen," Hannah said softly, but he pressed on. I have saved enough money to buy some land, he said. Not much, just a few acres outside of town. I can build a house, a proper home. We could have a garden, maybe some chickens. The boys would have a place to grow up safe. Are you asking me to marry you? Hannah asked, her voice careful. I am asking if you would consider it, Owen replied. I know it is fast. I know I am not much, just a cowboy with more dreams than sense. But I promise I would work hard for you and the boys. I promise I would never hurt you or abandon you the way that Wagon Train did. Hannah was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face. You would take on another man's children? She finally asked. They would be my children too, Owen said, if you said yes. I do not love you, Hannah said, and though the words stung, Owen appreciated her honesty. I know, he replied. I am not asking for love, I am asking for a chance. Hannah looked out at the hills again. Thomas and I, we were childhood sweethearts. We grew up together, fell in love when we were 15. I never imagined being with anyone else. I am sorry, Owen said. I should not have asked. Let me finish, Hannah said gently. I never imagined being with anyone else, but I also never imagined being widowed at 22 with 2 babies to feed. Life does not care about our plans. And you, Owen Nash, you saved our lives. You gave us everything when you had no obligation to do so. That means something. Owen waited, barely breathing. I may not love you now, Hannah continued, but I trust you. I have seen your character, your kindness, and maybe with time trust can grow into something more. Is that a yes? Owen asked, hardly daring to hope. Hannah turned back to him, and there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. It is a yes, she said, but I have conditions. Name them, Owen said immediately. I need time, Hannah said. Not long, but some. Thomas has been dead barely 2 months. I cannot marry you tomorrow. Of course, Owen agreed. And you have to promise me something, Hannah continued, her voice suddenly fierce. Promise me you will never lie to me, never leave me wondering. I cannot survive that kind of uncertainty again. I promise, Owen said solemnly. I will always be honest with you, always. Hannah held out her hand, and Owen took it, feeling the roughness of her palm against his. Then yes, Owen Nash, she said, I will marry you and we will build a home together. They were married in late April in Mrs. Patterson's sitting room with only the widow and the livery stable owner as witnesses. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had altered to fit her, and Owen wore his best shirt, freshly washed and pressed. The twins slept through the ceremony in a basket at their mother's feet. The circuit preacher spoke the words, and Owen slipped a simple gold band onto Hannah's finger. It had cost him nearly everything he had saved, but the look in her eyes when she saw it made it worth every penny. You may kiss your bride, the preacher said, and Owen leaned forward carefully, pressing a chaste kiss to Hannah's lips. It was brief, respectful, but he felt the promise of more in the way she did not pull away. That night, they shared a bed for the first time. Owen had made it clear she could have all the time she needed, but Hannah had surprised him by reaching for his hand in the darkness. I am scared, she admitted quietly. Of me? Owen asked, ready to move to the floor if needed. Of everything, Hannah said. Of this new life, of failing the boys, of not being the wife you deserve. Owen turned to face her, though he could barely see her in the dim light. You are already more than I deserve, he said honestly. And whatever comes, we will face it together. That is what marriage means. Hannah moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Thomas used to say something similar, she said softly. You would have liked him, I think. He was a good man. Tell me about him, Owen said, and she did, talking late into the night about the boy she had loved and the man he had become. Owen listened without jealousy, understanding that Hannah needed to speak these memories aloud, to honor what she had lost before she could fully embrace what they were building together. The next morning, Owen began work on their land. He had purchased 5 acres 3 miles outside of Deadwood, along a creek that ran clear and cold. The soil was good, protected by a stand of pines on one side and open to the south for sunlight. "This is where the house will go," he told Hannah, pointing to a level spot near the creek. Not too close to flood, but close enough for easy water. Hannah stood with a baby on each hip, surveying the land. "It is perfect," she said. Over the following weeks, Owen worked from dawn until dusk. He cut timber from the surrounding forest, dragged logs into place, notched and fitted them together with the skill his father had taught him years ago. Hannah helped when she could. The baby strapped to her back in turns while she mixed mud for chinking or held boards steady. They lived in a tent on the property, and though it was rough, there was something liberating about it. This was theirs, built with their own hands and sweat. No one could take it from them. "You are working too hard," Hannah said one evening as Owen stumbled into the tent, his hands blistered and bleeding. "The house needs to be done before winter," Owen replied, wincing as she cleaned his wounds. "Winter is months away," Hannah protested. "You will kill yourself at this pace." "I want you and the boys to have a proper home," Owen said stubbornly. Hannah cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "We already have a home," she said quietly. "Wherever you are, that is home. The house is just wood and nails." Owen felt something shift in his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the fire. "Hannah," he started, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. "I know," she said softly. "I know what you want to say, but not yet. Soon, I think, but not yet." Owen nodded, understanding. They were building more than just a house. They were building trust, building a foundation for something that could last a lifetime. And that could not be rushed. As spring deepened into early summer, the house began to take shape. It was not large, just 2 rooms with a loft above, but it was solid and well made. Owen built wide windows to let in light, and Hannah talked excitedly about curtains she would sew and furniture they would need. Samuel and Simon were growing rapidly, their small bodies filling out now that they had regular milk and food. Samuel was trying to roll over, his serious little face scrunched in concentration, while Simon had already mastered it and was attempting to scoot across the tent floor. "They are going to be crawling soon," Hannah said one evening, watching them with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "And then walking, and then I suppose they will be grown men leaving me behind." "Not for a while yet," Owen said, settling beside her. He had grown comfortable with the twins, no longer afraid he might break them when he picked them up. Simon reached for him now, making happy gurgling sounds, and Owen lifted the baby into his arms. "They think you are their father," Hannah said softly. "Is that all right?" Owen asked, suddenly uncertain. "It is more than all right," Hannah replied. "Thomas would have wanted them to have a father who loves them, and you do love them, do not you?" "Yes," Owen said simply. There was no point in denying it. These boys had become his in every way that mattered. "Good," Hannah said, and she leaned against his shoulder, the 4 of them sitting together as the sun set over their unfinished house. In mid-June, a wagon train passed through Deadwood, and Owen felt Hannah tense beside him when they saw it in town. "It might not be the same one," he said quietly. "I know," Hannah replied, but her hand found his and gripped tight. It was the same wagon train. Owen recognized the wagon master, a hard-faced man named Coltrane, from Hannah's description. He watched the man directing his people, buying supplies, acting like he had not left a young mother and her babies to die. "Let it go," Hannah said, reading Owen's expression. "He is not worth it." But Owen could not let it go. That evening, while Hannah was back at their tent with the babies, he found Coltrane in the saloon. "I need a word with you," Owen said, his voice dangerously quiet. Coltrane looked him up and down dismissively. "Do I know you, Cowboy?" "No, but you know Hannah Redding." "Or should I say Hannah Nash now?" Something flickered in Coltrane's eyes. "That name means nothing to me." "She was the woman you left to die in the Dakota Territory in February," Owen said. "Her and her twin baby boys." "Now see here," Coltrane blustered. "Her husband had fever. I could not risk my entire train for one family." "You could have given her supplies," Owen said, his hands clenched into fists. "You could have left her the wagon at least. Instead, you took everything and left her with 2 infants to starve." "She is alive, is not she?" Coltrane said. "Seems she managed just fine." "She nearly died," Owen said. "Those babies nearly died, and it would have been your fault." Coltrane stood, puffing out his chest. "You threatening me, boy?" Owen took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "No," he said finally. "I am just making sure you know. Making sure you have to live with what you did. Hannah and those boys are thriving now, no thanks to you. They have a home, a family. And you get to know that you left them to die and they survived anyway." He turned and walked out before Coltrane could respond, his whole body shaking with suppressed rage. Outside, he found Hannah waiting, the twins asleep in her arms. "You should not have come," Owen said. "I wanted to see his face," Hannah replied. "I wanted him to see that I am still here, still standing." "Did it help?" Owen asked. Hannah considered. "Yes," she said finally. "It did. Because I realized I do not care anymore. He does not matter. What matters is right here." She gestured to the babies, then to Owen. "This is my life now. He is just a bad memory." They walked back to their land together, and Owen felt something settle in his chest. Hannah was healing. They both were. By late July, the house was finished. It was not fancy, but it was sturdy and weatherproof. With a stone fireplace Owen had built himself and wooden floors that did not have a single gap between the boards. He had carved their initials into the lintel above the door. O.N. and H.N. 1876. "It is beautiful," Hannah breathed when he showed her the finished interior. "Owen, it is perfect." "It is home," Owen said. They moved in that very day, spreading out their meager belongings in the larger room that would serve as kitchen and living space. The smaller room was for the twins, though they still slept in a cradle in the main room so Hannah could hear them at night. That first night in their completed home, Owen made dinner while Hannah nursed the babies. It was simple fare, just beans and cornbread, but it tasted like a feast eaten at their own table in their own house. "I need to tell you something," Hannah said as they cleaned up after the meal. Owen looked at her, concerned by her serious tone. "What is it?" "I have been fighting it," Hannah said quietly. "Telling myself it is too soon, that I am betraying Thomas's memory, but I cannot fight it anymore." "Hannah," Owen said, his heart starting to pound. She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "I love you," she said simply. "I do not know exactly when it happened. Maybe when you first found us in the snow, maybe when you promised to always be honest, maybe while watching you build this house with your own hands. But it is true. I love you, Owen Nash." Owen felt like his chest might burst. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you," he said roughly. "I know that sounds impossible, but it is true. I saw you protecting those babies even though you were dying yourself, and I knew I would do anything for you." Hannah reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, and this time there was nothing chaste about it. This was a kiss full of promise and passion, of months of growing feelings finally allowed to bloom. "I am ready," Hannah whispered against his lips, "to be your wife in every way." That night, they came together as husband and wife truly for the first time, and Owen treated her with a tenderness that brought tears to Hannah's eyes. Afterward, Lying tangled together in their bed, Hannah traced the scars on his chest. "Tell me about these," she said softly. So Owen told her stories from his years of wandering, of close calls with wild animals and rough men, of mistakes made and lessons learned. And Hannah told him more about her life before, about growing up in Ohio and her dreams of seeing the West. "I never imagined it would be like this," she admitted. "Losing Thomas, nearly dying myself, but I also never imagined finding someone like you." "I am glad you did," Owen said, kissing her forehead. "Find me, I mean." "I think you found me," Hannah corrected with a smile. The rest of the summer passed in a blur of hard work and growing happiness. Owen planted a late garden while Hannah tended the twins and made their house into a home. She sewed curtains from fabric bought in town, braided rag rugs for the floor, and filled the shelves with preserves she made from wild berries. The twins were sitting up now, babbling to each other in their own language. Owen loved coming home from working the land to find them playing on a blanket while Hannah cooked dinner. It was a life he had never dared to dream of having. In August, Owen brought home a milk cow he had traded for, and Hannah cried with joy at the thought of fresh milk and butter. They named her Bessie, and she quickly became a beloved member of their small homestead. September brought cooler weather and the first hints of autumn color in the trees. Owen worked on building a chicken coop while Hannah started teaching the twins to eat solid food, which mostly resulted in more food on their faces than in their mouths. "They are going to be a year old in October," Hannah said one evening. "Can you believe it?" Owen could not. It seemed impossible that nearly a year had passed since he had found them in the snow. So much had changed, yet it also felt like they had always been together. "We should have a celebration," he said. "Invite Mrs. Patterson and maybe some of the neighbors." "We have neighbors now," Hannah teased. "The nearest homestead was still 3 miles away. We have people who care about us," Owen amended. "That is close enough." The celebration was small but joyful. Mrs. Patterson brought a cake she had baked, and the few families from nearby homesteads came bearing gifts of preserves and hand-knitted clothes for the twins. Samuel and Simon were overwhelmed by the attention, clinging to Hannah and Owen, but they eventually warmed up and enjoyed smashing their small cakes into crumbs. "You have built a good life here," Mrs. Patterson said to Owen as they watched Hannah play with the twins. "I am proud of you both." "I am just grateful," Owen replied. "Every single day." As winter approached again, Owen made sure they were well stocked with firewood and supplies. He had no intention of ever letting Hannah and the twins suffer through hunger and cold again. The root cellar was filled with vegetables from the garden, the smokehouse had venison and salt pork, and they had enough flour and cornmeal to last until spring. On the first snowfall in November, Hannah stood at the window watching the flakes drift down. Owen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I was just remembering last winter," Hannah said. "How different everything was, how scared I was." "You are safe now," Owen promised. "I know," Hannah said, turning in his arms. "That is what makes it so remarkable. In 1 year I went from dying in the snow to this. A home, a husband who loves me, healthy babies. It seems like a miracle." "You are the miracle," Owen said. "Your strength, your courage, that is what saved you all." "We saved each other," Hannah replied and kissed him softly. That winter was everything the previous one had not been. They were warm and well-fed, safe in their sturdy house while storms raged outside. Owen taught the twins to stack wooden blocks he had carved for them, while Hannah sewed clothes and mended and kept their home running smoothly. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire while Hannah sang. Her voice, which Owen had not heard before, was sweet and clear, filling the house with songs from her childhood. The twins would fall asleep to her singing, and Owen would hold her close, thinking about how lucky he was. One night in January, Hannah turned to him with a nervous expression. "I have something to tell you," she said. Owen's stomach dropped. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Hannah said quickly. "At least I do not think so. I am pregnant, Owen. We are going to have a baby." Joy flooded through Owen so intensely he could barely speak. "A baby," he repeated. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Hannah asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Owen said, pulling her into his arms. "Hannah, this is everything. You and the twins, and now this. It is more than I ever dreamed of." Hannah laughed, relief evident in her voice. "I was worried you might think it was too soon." "There is no such thing as too soon for happiness," Owen said firmly. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Hannah bloomed with health, her face glowing as her belly grew. The twins, now walking and getting into everything, seemed fascinated by their mother's changing shape. "Baby," Samuel would say, patting Hannah's stomach gently. "Yes, sweetheart," Hannah would confirm. "A baby brother or sister for you and Simon." Owen was beside himself with preparations. He built a new cradle, larger and sturdier than the one the twins had shared. He made sure Hannah did not lift anything heavy and insisted she rest every afternoon. "I am pregnant, not dying," Hannah protested, but her eyes were soft with love at his concern. "I am taking no chances," Owen replied stubbornly. "You and that baby are the most important things in the world to me." In late April, as the first wildflowers were blooming on the hillsides, Hannah went into labor. Mrs. Patterson had come to stay with them for the occasion, and she shooed Owen out of the house while she attended to Hannah. Owen paced outside, the twins playing at his feet, his heart in his throat every time he heard Hannah cry out. It was different than with the twins, because this time the child was his, created from his love for Hannah. The responsibility of it terrified him. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably less than one, Mrs. Patterson appeared at the door with a tired smile. "You have a daughter," she announced, "and your wife is asking for you." Owen rushed inside to find Hannah propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Owen approached on shaking legs, looking down at the impossibly small face peeking out from the blanket. She had Hannah's nose and what looked like his dark hair, and when she opened her eyes, they were a deep blue. "She is perfect," Owen breathed. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Elizabeth," Hannah said, "after your sister." Owen felt tears sting his eyes. "You would do that. She is part of the reason we are all here," Hannah said gently. "If you had not lost your sister, you might not have stopped when you heard me crying in the snow. In a way, she saved us too." "Elizabeth Nash," Owen said, testing the name. "It is perfect." The twins were brought in to meet their sister, and though they were too young to fully understand, they seemed delighted by the tiny baby. Samuel touched her hand gently while Simon made cooing noises at her. "Our family," Hannah said, looking at them all gathered around her bed. "Complete." But life, Owen was learning, was never truly complete. It kept growing, changing, offering new challenges and new joys. Elizabeth proved to be an easy baby, sleeping well and rarely fussing. The twins adored her, always wanting to help with her care in their toddler way. Owen expanded the garden and built a larger chicken coop, planning ahead for their growing family. One evening in June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played, Hannah took Owen's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking us in, changing your whole life." Owen looked at her in surprise. "Regret it?" "Hannah, finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." "You could have had an easier life," Hannah pointed out. a wife without the burden of another man's children, without all the complications. "I do not want an easier life," Owen said firmly. "I want this life. With you and Samuel and Simon and Elizabeth. This is exactly where I am meant to be." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I could love again after Thomas," she admitted. "But what I feel for you, it is different than what I felt for him. Not less, just different. Thomas was my first love, the love of my youth. You are my second chance, my miracle, and I love you more than I have words to express." "I love you too," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "More than anything in this world." Summer passed into fall and fall into another winter. Elizabeth took her first steps in December, right before Christmas, and the twins, now nearly 3 years old, were full of energy and curiosity. They helped Owen with simple chores, feeding the chickens and gathering eggs, and Hannah taught them their letters in the evenings. In early 1878, Hannah told Owen she was pregnant again. This time he was less shocked but no less delighted. Their family was growing and their homestead with it. Owen had added another room to the house, giving the twins their own space, and Elizabeth a room she would eventually share with her new sibling. Their second daughter was born in September, during the harvest. They named her Margaret after Hannah's mother, and she came into the world wailing lustily, announcing her presence to anyone who would listen. "She is going to be trouble, this one," Mrs. Patterson predicted with a smile, and she was right. Margaret was curious and bold from the start, in contrast to Elizabeth's more cautious nature. The years passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Owen expanded their land holdings, buying adjoining acres when they became available. He built a proper barn and acquired more livestock. Hannah's garden became the envy of the neighboring homesteads, producing vegetables in abundance. Samuel and Simon grew into sturdy boys, inseparable and devoted to each other. They took after their father Thomas in looks, Hannah said, but they had Owen's steady temperament. They called him Pa, and Owen had long since stopped correcting them. He was their father in every way that mattered. Elizabeth was gentle and kind, always the first to comfort her siblings when they were hurt or upset. Margaret was fierce and independent, keeping her older brothers on their toes. Owen loved watching them all grow, seeing their personalities emerge and develop. In the spring of 1881, Hannah gave birth to their first son together, a healthy boy they named James. The twins, now nearly 7 years old, were fascinated by their baby brother, and Elizabeth and Margaret at 5 and 3 were jealous at first but quickly came to adore him. "5 children," Owen said one evening, looking at their full house with wonder. "We have 5 children." "And a beautiful home and land, and each other," Hannah added, settling beside him with baby James in her arms. "We have everything, Owen." And they did. The homestead that Owen had started building in the spring of 1876 had become a thriving farm. They had cattle and horses, chickens and pigs, fields of wheat and corn. The house had grown to accommodate their family, with 4 bedrooms and a large kitchen where they all gathered for meals. But more than the physical prosperity, they had built a family founded on love and trust. Samuel and Simon knew the story of how Owen had found them and their mother in the snow, and they understood that he had chosen to be their father when he had no obligation to do so. That knowledge made them love him even more fiercely. Elizabeth and Margaret and James grew up knowing only security and affection. The wild days of Deadwood's gold rush were settling into something more civilized, with schools and churches and proper law. Owen served on the town council, and Hannah was active in the church auxiliary. They were respected members of their community, And when people told the story of the cowboy who had found a dying woman and her twin babies in the snow and built them a home by spring, it was always with admiration and warmth. On a spring evening in 1885, Owen and Hannah sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel and Simon, now 11, were teaching James, just 4 years old, to throw a ball. Elizabeth, 9, was reading to Margaret, 7, from a book of fairy tales. "Do you remember when I asked you if you regretted taking us in?" Hannah asked. "I remember telling you it was the best thing that ever happened to me," Owen replied. "And I meant it then and I mean it now." "I never thanked you properly," Hannah said, "for saving our lives." "Yes, you did," Owen said, gesturing to the scene before them. "This is all the thanks I could ever need." Hannah took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I was thinking about Thomas today," she said quietly. "It has been 9 years since he died, and I realized something. I think he would be happy for us. Happy that his sons have a good father, that I found love again." "I hope so," Owen said. "I know so," Hannah replied. "Because if our positions were reversed, if it was me who had died and you who had found someone else, I would want you to be happy. I would want our children to be loved and cared for, and that is exactly what you have given us." "We gave it to each other," Owen corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, Hannah. Before I found you, I was just drifting. No purpose, no direction. You gave me a reason to build something, to put down roots. You gave me a family." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The children's laughter filled the air, a sound that never got old no matter how many times Owen heard it. "Pa," Simon called, "come play with us." Owen stood, helping Hannah to her feet. "Coming," he called back. As they walked toward their children, Hannah squeezed his hand. "I love you, Owen Nash," she said. "I love you too, Hannah Nash," he replied. "Today and always." And there, on the land they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created, Owen knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The cowboy who had found a starving woman and her twin babies in the snow had indeed built them a home by spring. But more than that, he had built a life filled with love, purpose, and the kind of happiness that only comes from choosing each other every single day. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. In 1887, Hannah gave birth to twin girls, which they named Sarah and Ruth, much to the delight of Samuel and Simon, who jokingly claimed that twins ran in the family now. The house was expanded once more, and the farm continued to prosper. Samuel and Simon grew into fine young men, taking over more of the farm work as Owen's back began to protest the hard labor of his younger years. They were 17 now, nearly men, but still devoted to their family and the land they had grown up on. Elizabeth, at 13, was becoming a beautiful young woman with her mother's grace and her father's steady nature. Margaret, at 11, was still the wild one, always climbing trees and racing her brothers. James, at 8, followed his older brothers everywhere, determined to keep up despite being so much younger. And the twin girls, Sarah and Ruth, at 3, were mirror images of each other with golden curls and mischievous smiles. One evening in the fall of 1890, Owen and Hannah celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. The children had prepared a special dinner, with Samuel and Simon hunting a turkey and Elizabeth making a cake under her mother's supervision. As they sat around their large table, surrounded by the noise and chaos of their 7 children, Owen raised his glass of cider. "I want to make a toast," he said, and the table fell quiet. "14 years ago, I married the bravest woman I have ever known," Owen said, looking at Hannah. "She had already survived more hardship than most people face in a lifetime, yet she found the courage to trust me to build a life with me. Every day since then has been a gift. "Oh, Pa," Elizabeth said, her eyes misting. "I am not finished," Owen said with a smile. "I also want to toast all of you children. You are the reason we work so hard, the reason we built this home and this life. Watching you grow has been the greatest privilege of my life." "To family," Samuel said, raising his own glass. "To family," everyone echoed. Later that night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Hannah and Owen stood together looking out at their land bathed in moonlight. "Do you ever think about that day in the snow?" Hannah asked. "About how easily things could have gone differently?" "Sometimes," Owen admitted. "But I try not to dwell on what could have been. I am too grateful for what is." "I think about it often," Hannah said. "About how close we came to dying, how many small things had to align perfectly for us to survive. If you had taken a different route, if you had not heard me call out, if the storm had been just a bit worse, any of those things and we would not be here. But we are here," Owen said, pulling her close. "That is what matters." "I know," Hannah said, "and I am grateful every single day. For you, for our children, for this life we have built. I never imagined I could be this happy again after losing Thomas, but you showed me that the heart has room for more than one great love." Owen kissed her softly. "You are my only great love," he said, "and you always will be." In 1892, Samuel announced that he wanted to study agriculture at the new college that had opened in Brookings. It was the first time one of their children would be leaving home for an extended period, and Hannah cried for 3 days straight. "He is only 18, she said to Owen. "He is still my baby." "He is a young man with dreams," Owen replied gently. "We have to let him pursue them." "I know," Hannah said, wiping her eyes. "I am proud of him. I just miss him already." Simon decided to stay and work the farm, content with the life he knew. Elizabeth was courting a young man from town, a schoolteacher named David Morrison, and Owen found himself having to resist the urge to interrogate the boy every time he came calling. "He is a good man," Hannah assured him. "And Elizabeth is sensible. Trust her judgment." "I do trust her," Owen said. "It is him I do not trust," Hannah laughed. "You were once a young man courting a woman. Have some sympathy." "That was different," Owen protested. "How?" Hannah challenged. "Because I had honorable intentions," Owen said, "and you think David does not." Hannah asked. Owen had to admit that David seemed genuinely devoted to Elizabeth. Still, it was hard to see his little girl growing up and preparing to leave home. Margaret, now 14, announced that she wanted to be a veterinarian, which shocked everyone. "Women do not become veterinarians," Owen said automatically, then felt terrible when Margaret's face fell. "Why not?" Margaret demanded. "I am better with animals than any boy in this county." "She has a point," Hannah said quietly. Owen looked at his fierce daughter and saw the same determination that had kept Hannah alive in the snow all those years ago. "You are right," he said. "If that is what you want, we will find a way to make it happen." Margaret threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Pa." James, at 10, was already showing signs of being a talented carpenter, spending hours in the workshop Owen had built, creating intricate wooden toys and furniture. The twins, Sarah and Ruth, were 7 now and inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and always getting into trouble together. In the spring of 1894, Elizabeth married David Morrison in a beautiful ceremony in the church in Deadwood. Hannah cried happy tears as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle, and Owen had to clear his throat several times during the vows. "She looks so beautiful," Hannah whispered. "She looks like you," Owen replied, squeezing her hand. The reception was held at the farm, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around to celebrate. Samuel was home from college, and the whole family was together, dancing and laughing under strings of lanterns. "This is what it is all about," Mrs. Patterson said to Owen as they watched the celebration. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp. Building something that lasts, creating a legacy. "I never thought I would have this," Owen admitted. "A family, a home, all these people who care about each other." "You earned it," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "By being a good man and making good choices. That is all any of us can do." As the evening wore on, Owen found himself standing apart from the crowd, just watching. Hannah came to join him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," Owen said. "How far we have come, how much has changed. When I found you in that snow, I never could have imagined all of this." "Neither could I," Hannah said. "I thought my life was over." "But it was really just beginning." "Our life," Owen corrected. "Our life," Hannah agreed. The years continued to flow by, marked by milestones both big and small. Samuel graduated from college and returned home with new ideas for improving the farm. Elizabeth had her first baby, a son she named Owen Thomas, honoring both her father and the man who had fathered the twins. Hannah became a grandmother and threw herself into the role with joy. Simon married a girl from a neighboring farm in 1896, and they built a house on the far edge of the Nash property. Margaret defied convention and enrolled in a veterinary program in Chicago, writing home regularly about her studies and adventures in the big city. James, at 15, was already being commissioned to build furniture for families in town, his skill with wood undeniable. Sarah and Ruth, now 12, were developing their own interests. Sarah loved to read and write, while Ruth was fascinated by plants and wanted to study botany. In the summer of 1898, Owen and Hannah celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. Their children, now ranging from 12 to 24, organized a surprise party that brought tears to both their eyes. 22 years, Hannah marveled. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Owen said. "Some days I still feel like that young cowboy building our first house. Other days I feel every one of my 48 years. You are still handsome," Hannah said, touching his now gray-streaked hair. "Distinguished." "And you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Owen replied, meaning every word. Hannah was 44 now, her face lined with the passage of time, but to Owen she was as lovely as the day he had married her. That fall, tragedy struck when Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep. The whole town mourned the loss of the woman who had been a mother figure to so many, and Owen and Hannah felt the loss deeply. "She was there for us when we had nothing," Hannah said at the funeral. "She gave us a place to stay, her kindness, her wisdom. I do not know what we would have done without her." "She lived a good life," Owen said, "and she knew how much she was loved. In her will, Mrs. Patterson left her boarding house to Owen and Hannah, along with a note that said simply, "For the family who knows the value of home." They decided to turn it into a place for travelers in need, offering free lodging to families who found themselves in difficult circumstances. It was a way to honor Mrs. Patterson's memory and to pay forward the kindness that had been shown to them so many years ago. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. On January 1, 1900, the entire Nash family gathered at the farmhouse to mark the occasion. Samuel and his wife had 2 children now. Simon and his wife were expecting their first. Elizabeth had 3 children, and even Margaret had come home from Chicago for the celebration. "A new century," Owen said, looking around at the faces of his children and grandchildren. "Who knows what it will bring?" "Whatever it brings, we will face it together," Samuel said, and everyone raised their glasses in agreement. As the party continued around them, Owen and Hannah slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The night was cold and clear, stars brilliant overhead. "24 years since I found you in the snow," Owen said. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday." "I was so scared that day," Hannah admitted. "Scared of dying, scared of the babies dying. I had given up hope." "But you survived," Owen said. "You all survived." "Because of you," Hannah said. "You saved us, Owen, not just our lives, but everything that came after. This family, this life, all of it exists because you stopped to help a stranger." "You were never a stranger," Owen said. "From the moment I saw you, you were meant to be mine. I knew it even then." Hannah turned to face him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "I love you," she said. "I have said it thousands of times, but I need you to know, I love you more now than I ever have. Every year, every day, I fall deeper in love with you." Owen pulled her close, holding her tight against the cold. "And I love you," he said. "You are my miracle, Hannah Nash. You and our children and this life we built, all of it is a miracle." They stood there together, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of loss and hardship. The farmhouse behind them glowed with light and echoed with laughter, a testament to their love and determination. The years that followed brought more changes. Samuel took over the day-to-day running of the farm as Owen's health began to decline. He had developed a persistent cough that worried Hannah, though Owen insisted he was fine. "You are not fine," Hannah said firmly in the spring of 1902. "You need to see the doctor." "I am just getting old," Owen protested. "You are 52, not 90, Hannah replied. "Please, for me." The doctor in Deadwood confirmed that Owen had developed bronchitis from years of working in harsh weather. He prescribed rest and medicine and insisted that Owen could no longer do heavy labor. "Rest," Owen grumbled. "I do not know how to rest." "Then you are going to learn," Hannah said firmly. It was harder than Owen expected, stepping back from the work he had done his entire life. But he found other ways to be useful. He taught James advanced carpentry techniques, spent time with his grandchildren, and helped Hannah run the boarding house in town. Simon and Samuel ran the farm beautifully, implementing the modern techniques Samuel had learned in college. The Nash farm was one of the most prosperous in the territory, known for quality livestock and crops. Margaret surprised everyone by returning from Chicago in 1903 with a husband, a fellow veterinarian named Peter Scott. They set up a practice in Deadwood, and Margaret became the first female veterinarian in the Dakota Territory, a fact that made Owen burst with pride. Elizabeth's children were growing fast, and she was pregnant with her fourth. James, now 21, had opened his own carpentry shop in town and was making a name for himself. Sarah had become a teacher, while Ruth was studying at the agricultural college, following in Samuel's footsteps. The twins, Samuel and Simon, were now 28 years old, fathers themselves, running the farm that Owen had built. Watching them work together, still as close as they had been as babies, filled Owen with satisfaction. He had given them a good life, a solid foundation to build upon. In the fall of 1905, Owen and Hannah celebrated their 29th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They had dinner at the boarding house, in the same room where they had been married all those years ago. 29 years, Hannah said. "And I still remember every detail of our wedding day." "You wore a blue dress," Owen said, "and you looked terrified." "I was terrified," Hannah admitted. "Terrified of marrying again, of trusting someone new, but you made it easy, Owen. From the very beginning, you made it easy to love you." "Do you ever think about Thomas anymore?" Owen asked. It was a question he had not posed in years. Hannah was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but not with pain, not anymore. I think of him the way you think of someone from your childhood, someone who was important once but belongs to a different life." The boys look like him, and I see echoes of him in them sometimes, but they are more your sons than his. You raised them, loved them, shaped them into the men they became." "I never wanted to replace him," Owen said. "You did not replace him," Hannah said. "You gave me a different kind of love, a second chance at happiness. Both loves are real, both matter. But you are my present and my future, Owen. You have been for nearly 30 years now." As 1906 arrived, Owen's health took a turn for the worse. The bronchitis had progressed despite the doctor's treatments, and by spring he was confined mostly to bed. Hannah rarely left his side, tending to him with the same fierce devotion she had shown all those years ago when he had cared for her in the cave. The children took turns visiting, bringing the grandchildren to see him. Owen loved those visits, loved hearing about their lives and accomplishments. Samuel and Simon came every day, updating him on the farm and asking his advice on decisions, though they were more than capable of running things themselves. One evening in late May, with Hannah sitting beside him holding his hand, Owen looked around the room they had shared for so many years. "We did good, did not we?" he said, his voice weak but content. "We did wonderful," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. "You built us a home by spring just like you promised, and so much more than that." "I need you to know something," Owen said, struggling to breathe. "These 30 years with you, they were everything. You made my life worth living, Hannah. You and the children. Please do not leave me," Hannah whispered. "I do not know how to do this without you." "Yes, you do," Owen said gently. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived when you should have died. You built a life from nothing. You raised 7 beautiful children. You will survive this too." "I do not want to," Hannah said, "but you will," Owen insisted. "For the children, for the grandchildren. You will tell them our story. Make sure they know that love and kindness can overcome anything." That night, surrounded by his family, Owen Nash passed away peacefully. He was 56 years old and had lived a life full of love and purpose. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over the territory. Everyone, it seemed, had been touched by Owen's kindness and generosity. The stories shared painted a picture of a man who had lived his values every single day, who had taken in a dying woman and her babies and built them not just a house, but a legacy. Hannah stood at his grave, supported by Samuel and Simon on either side, and said her final goodbye to the man who had saved her life and stolen her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I will love you forever." The months after Owen's death were the hardest of Hannah's life. She had lost Thomas to fever, but she had been young then, still capable of starting over. Now, at 52, the thought of life without Owen seemed impossible, but she had promised him she would survive, and Hannah Nash was a woman who kept her promises. She threw herself into running the boarding house, helping travelers just as Owen had helped her. She spent time with her grandchildren, of which there were now 12, telling them stories about their grandfather and the man he had been. Samuel and Simon ran the farm beautifully, expanding it even further while maintaining the values their father had instilled in them. Elizabeth's children were growing into fine young people. Margaret's veterinary practice was thriving, and James was engaged to be married. Sarah and Ruth both found careers they loved. Sarah as a writer and Ruth as a botanist, both of them breaking barriers for women in their fields. 5 years after Owen's death, in 1911, Hannah gathered her entire family at the farm for Thanksgiving. It was a massive crowd now. Her 7 children, their spouses, her 17 grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. As they sat around the extended table, barely fitting in the large dining room Owen had built, Hannah looked at all the faces and felt overwhelming gratitude. "I want to say something," she announced, and the room fell quiet. 35 years ago, I was dying in the snow with my twin baby boys, Hannah began. I had given up hope. I was ready to die. But then a cowboy named Owen Nash found us, and he refused to let us die. He saved our lives, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure we thrived. Samuel and Simon, now 37 years old with families of their own, reached for each other's hands. He built us a home by spring, just as the title of our story would say. Hannah continued. But more than that, he built us a family, a legacy. Every person in this room exists because Owen Nash was the kind of man who stopped to help a stranger, because he chose love over convenience, responsibility over self-interest. He was a good man, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. He was the best man, Hannah agreed. And I want all of you to remember his example. Remember that one act of kindness can change everything. That love and determination can overcome any obstacle. That family is not just about blood, but about choosing each other every single day. To Grandpa Owen, one of the grandchildren said, raising a glass. To Grandpa Owen, everyone echoed. That night, after everyone had left and Hannah was alone in the house that Owen had built, she stood at the window looking out at the land they had worked together. The farm stretched out in the moonlight, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to their love and labor. We did it, Hannah whispered to the empty room to Owen's memory. We built something that will last forever. Our children are thriving, our grandchildren are happy. The home you built by spring has grown into something neither of us could have imagined. She touched the window glass, cold under her fingers. I miss you every day, but I am grateful for every moment we had together. You gave me 30 years of love and happiness. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to keep fighting. And I will honor that gift by living fully, by making sure our story is never forgotten. Hannah lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1923 at the age of 69. She was buried beside Owen, and their joint headstone read, Owen and Hannah Nash. He built them a home by spring. Together they built a legacy that will last forever. The Nash farm continued to thrive for generations. Samuel's and Simon's children took over the operation, implementing new techniques while honoring the traditional values their grandfather had established. The boarding house in Deadwood remained in the family, continuing to offer shelter to those in need. Elizabeth's children became teachers and doctors, spreading kindness throughout the community. Margaret's veterinary practice was eventually taken over by one of her daughters, continuing the tradition of women breaking barriers. James's carpentry was renowned throughout the territory, and furniture he had built was passed down through generations of families. Sarah became a published author, writing books about life on the frontier that were read across the country. Ruth's work in botany led to improved farming techniques that helped countless families. Every one of Hannah and Owen's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had learned. That family is everything, that kindness matters, and that love can overcome any obstacle. The story of the cowboy who found a starving woman with twin babies in the snow and built them a home by spring became legend in the Dakota Territory. It was told around campfires and dinner tables, in schoolrooms and churches. It was a reminder that one person's choice to help another can ripple forward through time, creating waves of goodness that last forever. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Owen and Hannah Nash were together again, watching over the family they had created and the legacy they had built, knowing that their love story would never truly end as long as there were people who remembered the power of kindness, the strength of family, and the miracle of finding love even in the darkest circumstances. Their home, built in the spring of 1876, still stood nearly a century later, lovingly maintained by their descendants. Inside, on the mantel above the fireplace Owen had built with his own hands, sat a photograph from their 25th wedding anniversary. Owen and Hannah stood together, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera with genuine joy. Behind them in the photograph, barely visible but unmistakably there, were all 7 of their children. And in their faces could be seen the love, the security, and the happiness that Owen and Hannah had worked so hard to build. It was a picture of a family that should never have existed, of children who should have died in the snow, of a love that grew from the most unlikely circumstances. But it was real, solid, and enduring proof that miracles do happen, that hope can survive even the harshest winter, and that when you choose love, when you choose kindness, when you choose to stop and help a stranger in need, you might just build something that will last forever. The Nash family story became more than just a tale of survival. It became a blueprint for how to live a good life. Work hard, love deeply, help others, and never give up hope. And all of it began with a cowboy who heard a cry in the snow and made the choice to stop, to help, to care. Owen Nash built them a home by spring. But what he really built was a future filled with love, and that was the greatest gift of all.